it's a duplicitous question or a multifaceted question. That's great, nice. In that, I think it's changed it in one way. Just it's made, you know, funding available to more people. You know, it's a hard thing to measure. I wonder if it's just shifted the way that people figure it out. I know for us, it definitely was like an opportunity that didn't exist. But you know, on the smaller ones where it's like $5 or something, I wonder if it's just instead of asking mom, you know. But the cooler part, I think, the way that it's changed music more profoundly, or at least illustrated it, is that it calls upon the musician, or you know, if you're an architect or a filmmaker, to expose more of the process than just the end. You know, in our case, just an album or just a song, but sort of the richness of the experience from your perspective. And I think what's cool about that is, in this age of sort of, you know, long tail content, as they say, long tail creative endeavors, there are all these little communities who care about certain pieces of material, whether it's a book or a song. And the name of the game is depth with that community instead of breadth. And so there's still those that play the breadth game. You know, Lady Gaga touches a lot of people. There are many who have very successful careers, just, you know, just kind of speaking deeply to a smaller group. And, you know, the Grateful Dead, I think, were one of the first to figure that out. And now, 30, 40 years later, everyone's doing it, you know, from architects to watchmakers to movie makers. And so that's great. It's changing not just Kickstarter, but Kickstarter certainly at the forefront of it.
I wonder what the Grateful Dead's Kickstarter campaign would have been. My
God, I think their whole career was their Kickstarter campaign. God, that is going back a little ways. Pretty much hatred. No, I'm just teasing. I know, it's just a complex answer. You know, it was just time to be done. It's like, I don't know, when you decide to move towns or something, and it's not necessarily one thing, like you don't like the deli, it's like, want a bigger house, you know, snow's too much there, and there were a lot of little things like that. But I think it was, you know, as hard as it was to make the decision back then, it was the right time. And I was teasing about hatred. I mean, some discomfort, but certainly not hatred.
Well, you've done some reunion shows recently with the guys.
Yeah.
How have those gone?
They were good. They were, you know, they were great. It was fun to get back together as a posse. We hadn't stood in the same room for over a decade, so that's a trip unto itself. And it was neat to see fan reaction, and it was fun. It was fun to play.
Cool.
The main reason I dropped my name was just, well, A, I felt a little self-conscious about it, and then B, it was really long, and C, Genauer's hard to say, so it was like, Reid Genauer and the Assembly of Dirt, Reid Genauer and the Assembly of, you know, Mud, and so that was the primary reason. And I don't know, I think it's just cooler to be in a band. Like I like, as a fan, I like knowing about the band dynamics and watching the band dynamics as opposed to, you know, just watching Lady Gaga strut her stuff. And truthfully, the music that we make is band music, so it makes more sense to live under an umbrella.
You've been listening to a lot of Gaga lately?
A little bit, to be honest. There are a couple of tunes I like, but she's certainly talented. You know, I think as a younger person, I was so turned off by like marketing and the plastic veil of some of the pop music that I didn't give it a chance, and then listen to it more now for what, you know, just for the musical relevance, and she's talented. The easiest thing to do is just be yourself, at least, you know, in the context of my life and my music and our community of fans. But I think what people get turned off by, and I understand it, is that, you know, the art gets obscured by sort of just the BS related to commercializing it, and, you know, and it rings hollow and plastic, and it is to some degree. But I guess my point is, if you can get past it, you know, there's sometimes and sometimes not, you know, but just the same as on the grassroots scene, you know, everybody's being themselves, and sometimes you find great music, and sometimes you find some guy being himself who happens to stink, you know. You know, it didn't really change it that much, because we did the stems, or the basic tracks, first, and then, you know, approached people with songs that they could actually listen to, and thoughtfully, you know, tried to give people the chance to play on songs that we thought they'd, you know, intuitively understand. But I think without those songs kind of 3/4 of the way done, nobody would have said yes, because they wouldn't know what they're saying yes to. It was helpful to have a song and have them be able to sort of, you know, digest it before making a commitment. Oh, I don't think it's dying at all. If anything, I think it's proliferated too much. You know, in that bands like the Grateful Dead and like Fish and others, you know, certainly jazz musicians and stuff, were saying something in their improv, and they're, you know, it's really easy to get out there and, you know, wank out on 2 chords. The question is, are you saying anything, or are you just doing it as a sign mark, you know, as a signpost that says we're a band that jams? And, you know, I've said this before, and I sound kind of like a grumpy old man, but I just see more of that than, you know, people making interesting artistic statements. Zappa did, Fish did, Santana did, Clapton did. Lots of bands are just, you know, noodling back and forth between E and A, and it's like, there's only so much of that you can take in a scene, and then, you know, in a band, and then in a song. So I don't know. I see a lot of bands doing well. Humphreys McGee's doing great. Mo is still out there killing it. You know, Widespread's coming back. Fish is still playing. So I you know, I think I still see it as alive and well. And you know, in terms of what would it take, I don't know. It takes exceptional musicians, you know, and there just aren't that many exceptional musicians. And then, you know, just stylistically, there's lots and lots of attention given to the indie rock scene. But that, to me, is like not taking away from improv and jam band land. It just happens to be a more fashionable, you know, style of music. And they, you know, like it or not, they are more fashionable. They wear cooler clothes. They write, you know, more sort of intellectual lyrics versus, you know, some dude, barefoot guy, prancing around the stage singing about mushrooms, you know. So you can see why the press, why the critics are turned off by it. And I think that's why a lot of people in the jam band scene don't want to be pigeonholed. It's because you just don't want to be that cliche guy, you know, with a rainbow and a mushroom and bare feet. But having said all that, there's lots of great music being made within, you know, within the jam band scene. We played yesterday with the Grant Farm, and they're, you know, their jam band by most measures phenomenal musicianship, great songwriting, great singing, and you know, there's an example of a band that I think is awesome. We were talking about this in the car today. The Barr Brothers are making really interesting music, and others. You know, I've always been a fan of Jonah Smith. I'm trying to, you know, certainly Humphreys. You gotta sort of bow down to their execution and their musicianship. Excellence. No, I don't know. I think there were 2 things. One is that we had so many bells and whistles on Some Assembly Required that we, you know, purposefully shied away from that and tried to have it be, as John Lassesse put it, our white album, kind of, you know, a more stripped down version of what we do. So that was one. And then two is, you know, we do jam to some degree live. I mean, we do absolutely jam. We do 8 minutes instead of 20. And part of that is frankly, is me. I'm like the restricting, I'm the gate to that in some ways, in that, you know, I am a singer and a songwriter, and in terms of the jam, there's only so much I have to contribute, and so I'd rather not sit up there and play EA for 20 minutes. And I think, you know, if I stepped off stage, the guys in AOD could probably say something interesting for 20 minutes. It's not a note to self. But the album is just the opposite of that. It's really song focused. And we worked with a guy named Ryan Freeland who encouraged us to sort of be more relaxed and use more touch and just kind of be more nuanced about our approach in the studio. And his point was, which I think was a valid one, is in the live setting, you know, you have to beat people over the head because they're drinking beers and talking, you know, and they want to be moved, literally. They want to dance, right? But in the studio, you don't have that same pressure, and I think we always felt that pressure coming in. And so to say, okay, let's push that aside for a minute while we make the record. We'll revisit it, you know, Wednesday when we take the stage, was liberating, and it was just a way of flipping around the thought process. And I don't know, you know, if we'll use it on the next record or not, but it gave us a collection of songs that are more intimate, and I think brings the listener nearer to our music. And the recording itself is very airy and spacious, and so you feel. And I think we afforded that opportunity because we played with a lighter touch, and thereby leaving more room for air, and you feel like it's a three-dimensional recording, like you're in it when you listen to it. And that's really, you know, to me, just a cool technique for recording. Jason and I connected, well, when Nate left the band a few years back, you know, I think we felt a certain, you know, sense of panic. And again, instead of like giving into that panic, we said, screw it, let's just kind of sit back and let things happen naturally. And that was part of the inspiration for Some Assembly Required, was just, you know, to fill that void with something else. And then I just didn't want to rush out and hire a keyboard player or some other instrumentalist for the sake of doing it. So I met Jason. I think we'd sort of known of each other, or maybe even met, but we were formally introduced by a woman named Lucy Chapin, who's a friend and a singer-songwriter herself, and she knew we needed somebody, and so Jason and I just hung out a couple times. Like before we even played music, just I went to his house. His girlfriend cooked up some steaks. They plied me full of vodka, and it was funny. We sat down to play that first night, and I had one too many. I couldn't remember any song to play. I just kind of looked at the guitar with you know, with wonder. So we hung out for a little bit just to kind of catch the vibe, and then we took it just slowly, you know, to see if it felt good on both sides, and because it's just hard to know if the chemistry is going to work. And what's interesting is, like, it's taken a while, but now with Dave and Jason having been in the band, you know, for a year plus, you start to feel, you know, the band speak with a singular voice, and you can hear people listening, which is a weird thing to say, but you hear people reacting to each other in real time. And it takes a long time to get to that, and I think, you know, for the first X months, particularly Dave, who's holding down the ship with the drums, was just like, you know, I just want to make sure I don't miss the bridge, let alone try and embellish or add some real personal voice. So it's great. It's nice to hear them both be able to put themselves into the music and play it with leisure rather than sort of uptight concern. So it's invigorating for us as a band. It feels, you know, like a rebirth for sure. It's great.
Is that what it takes? It just takes time.
You know, again, it takes musicians who are capable of it, and it takes time and consistency and repetitive actions.